Welcome back to Data and Context. I'm Allie Barefoot with Cotality. This episode is a part of a mini-series that we have right here on the YouTube channel where we break down Cotality's Home Price Index report. Cotality's recent report featuring August data tells us that the housing market is a little bit unbalanced, basically meaning that it tells a different story depending on where you live. For example, Cotality's data shows us that home sales have reached some of the lowest levels that we've seen in decades. But home prices haven't necessarily dropped alongside sales, at least not everywhere. And while a lot of the country is actually seeing affordability get a little bit better, home buying still feels a little bit out of reach with high mortgage rates, increased insurance costs, and it's really leaving just a little bit of room for confidence for the buyer. However, with change, there could be new opportunities. So to break down October's Home Price Index report, we're going to be talking with Cotality's chief economist, Dr. Selma Hepp. Let's go on ahead and jump into today's questions. Selma, thank you so much again for joining us on Data and Context for the October edition of our mini-series.
Hi, Allie. Thanks so much for having me back again.
Of course, I honestly can't believe it's October, but we know that the October Home Price Index report came out that features August data. And I kind of just want to start this off by setting the scene for buyers, for people that are interested, and homeowners, because the market appears to be a bit of a contradiction. In some areas, prices are cooling, but affordability still feels a little bit out of reach. How did we get to this point, and where does rebalancing really start, and what does that really mean for homeowners?
Yeah, that's a great question. Affordability really does remain out of reach for many home buyers simply because both home prices and mortgage rates have increased so much over the last few years. In our internal analysis, we looked at the inflation-adjusted payment for principal and interest, and we did see that it went down about 8% from May 2024 peak, and this is mostly due to lower mortgage rates, but the payment is still 72% higher than where it was pre-pandemic. So that is why it's really feeling so out of reach. In addition to that, we've talked about this before. We know that insurance and property taxes have gone up as well over the last few years. So that component of the payment is also up some 30% from pre-pandemic. So when you take both together, people are really constrained, in terms of what they're able to afford.
Right. And Cotality's From House to Home survey found that 60% of Gen Z buyers found the home buying process to be stressful on its own. Is improved affordability enough to bring back sideline buyers, or is consumer confidence now the real barrier?
Home buying will always be a stressful process because it is one of the largest financial decisions that people make. When you bring into the process uncertainty around what's happening with the economy, especially uncertainty around job security or financial stability, that makes it very difficult to move forward with that decision. And I think right now, potential home buyers are worrying, and we see that consistently in consumer confidence data. They are worried about their future, their financial future. They're worried about stability or security of their jobs. And so that will make them less likely to enter the housing market.
That makes total sense. Obviously, once they regain some of that confidence, maybe more opportunities might present themselves to these future home buyers. And could regional affordability gaps reshape mitigation patterns in the next few years? For example, Florida has 7 of the top 10 metros reporting negative growth in your October Home Price Index report. Are we starting to see a geographical reset in where people choose to live and invest?
Yes, to some extent. Florida has long been a net in-migration state, and it was actually ranking among top net in-migration state, meaning that on the net, when you take all the people coming in and those people that are leaving, it was growing at a really fast pace. But as a result of that, a very high in-migration, it is one of the areas that saw spiraling home prices. Home prices cumulatively in Florida are among highest that we've seen in the nation. On top of that, we again talk about the cost of insurance, and that meant that affordability in Florida has significantly fallen. As a result of that, and then overall concerns maybe around ability to get insurance, rising inventories, Florida has seen somewhat of a reset. So that's why many markets in Florida now are seeing their home prices decline, because there's again that reset of adjusting for actual number of people that are looking to buy homes in Florida. So one interesting fact about Florida is that its in-migration peaked in 2022 and has since the largest slowdown in in-migration. In other words, meaning that now many fewer folks are looking to buy a home there than they were at the peak of the pandemic or even prior to the pandemic. On the flip side, you have areas that were laggers in terms of home price appreciation during the pandemic, but now those markets are popular again. So markets where we see net in-migration increase significantly are areas of Northeast and especially areas surrounding New York, and that's where we do see some of the fastest rates of home price appreciation continue.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to keep an eye on the Northeast. As you said, that home price appreciation is continuing to grow. And if, a couple of times, you and I have both, we've talked about increasing mortgage rates and increasing insurance costs, higher taxes than we've seen in the last few years. And you mentioned that the market has slowly shifted the negotiating power towards the buyer if they can afford to act. Who can afford to act right now? Who can afford to buy? And how has that profile kind of changed?
Yeah, absolutely. The shift in negotiating power has occurred in some markets, especially in those markets that have seen large increases in inventory. But overall, the trend that we've seen over the last few years is an increasingly exclusive market. It's a market that tailors mostly or is affordable mostly for older, wealthier, and folks that are more likely to pay with cash, or even have substantial down payment assistance, whether it's from their parents, younger buyer having down payment assistance from their parents, or just overall large savings to be able to come into the housing market. So, let me just dig into this a little bit further. So how we know that the typical buyer is older, we know that the median age of all home buyers have gone up, first-time home buyers as well. So we know that the home buyers at the moment are skewing more older than they used to be. A record share of home sales are still with cash. That share has increased over the course of the pandemic, especially when mortgage rates increased in 2022 and has remained elevated. The other thing is because of accumulation of home price appreciation that has allowed folks to accumulate equity in their home, it's really those that have that accumulated equity that can now take that cash and move into another home, which this goes back to that down payment issue. So really, it's about higher income folks. Generally, they are dual income, so you need dual income to afford, meaning generally married couples, larger down payments, and just more difficult otherwise to enter the housing market.
So it's definitely one of those scenarios where maybe it's time to sit down with your finances and determine if this is the right time to buy or not. And like you said, that the Northeast is really kind of booming right now. And something that I've also noticed that, Florida, residing in more of the South, what's behind the persistent strength in the Northeastern markets compared to some weakness across parts of the South and the West?
So The primary difference between the two is that there is a fundamental imbalance between supply and demand in those two sets of markets. In South and Southeast, we're seeing price corrections because we have seen surge in inventory and weakened demand, so less people moving to those areas. On the flip side, Northeast remains so competitive because there's been a structural constraint to new housing supply. So it's an area that's been long undersupplied, much less mobility in that area. Also, generally higher incomes, more stable incomes that are driving some of that strong demand. So to give you an example of what's happening in Northeast, we have more stable and high wage jobs there. When you think about major Northeastern markets such as Boston, New York, Philly, they're anchored by recession resilient and high wage sectors such as finance, biotech, healthcare, and education. And so these strong and diverse labor markets continue to attract a lot of high income earners and are providing that income for stability in the housing market. The other thing that's happening in Northeastern markets that is allowing people, that is giving some levels of affordability, is that the demand is spilling from these major urban centers to more adjacent mid-sized metros. So some of the areas where we saw strongest levels of home price appreciation, strongest rates of home price appreciation include Hartford, Connecticut, Worcester, Massachusetts, Buffalo, New York. And those are the adjacent, more affordable markets where people can move, but also relatively easily commute to the big employment centers. On the flip side, what happened with in South is that because of the less restrictions on new construction and zoning restrictions and things like that, the supply was able to more rapidly respond to this pandemic era migration boom. So as a result of that, over the last few years, we've seen a bit of an oversupply of new construction in those markets. And so when you have a lot of that supply combined with now more supply of existing homes for sale that are being sold because costs of holding on to those properties have gone up so much because insurance, property taxes, and such. You have now a combination of the two, where both inventories on both types of inventories are increasing and putting a downward pressure on home prices.
Really interesting. That's definitely something that I would like to keep an eye on to see, if that ends up balancing itself out or if the Northeast continues to be a little bit more dominant throughout the rest of 2025. And my last question here for you, Selma, is kind of along those lines. What is one key indicator or just an indicator that you'll be watching over the next couple of months to really tell us where the market is headed?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things to keep an eye out for. One big one, obviously, is mortgage rates. It is the immediate lever that dictates demand, so to say. And we have seen mortgage rates come down over the last month or so. And that has been already shown to be favorable in terms of moving some folks off the sidelines. So we've seen both increases in refi activity, which is a separate subject, but also increase in mortgage purchase application, meaning application to buy a home. And so mortgage rate always is sort of, especially now when we are in such an unaffordable environment, mortgage rates do make a difference for one's budget. The other thing that I've been keeping an eye out for is what's happening in terms of the balance between home buyers and home sellers. When you have too many home sellers, then the prices tend to go down because of a competition to attract buyers, and then you have sort of the flip opposite on the other end. And as we talked about, there's a lot of variations across markets. But what I would be paying attention to is, for example, for the inventory that's out there, what share of inventory is seeing price declines? In other words, to what extent are sellers discounting before they get an offer from a potential buyer. You can also look at month supply, meaning which is a ratio of active inventory to number of homes on number of sales in that market. When month supply goes up, it could be either a function of more inventory in the market, less inventory in the market, or really that the home sales activity has slowed down, which will drive that number up. And that's what we've been seeing in number of markets as well. There are other things that you can look at days on market. How long does it take for, on average, to sell a home? That number was really short during the pandemic. Homes were selling within 7 to 10 day period. Now that number is much higher, and actually trends similar to the numbers that we saw pre-pandemic, anywhere between 30 and 40 days before a typical seller gets an offer. So, there are a number of indicators that can give you a sense of what's happening in the housing market.
No, absolutely. You've given me a lot of indicators to keep up with just in my own time, of just to see how mortgage rates are possibly declining and how long has this house been on the market for. So these are definitely things that I'll definitely use in my practice as I'm also searching for a new home. But Selma, thank you again for taking the time to break down October's home price index report with me. I love these conversations, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting to discuss November's with you as well.
Sounds good. I look forward to it as well.
Thank you again to Dr. Selma Hepp for joining me again on Data and Context, and thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't already, go on ahead, hit that subscribe button for me on Cotality's YouTube page, and if you guys want to find out all the latest information, as always, head over to Cotality.com.